Welcome to the Autism ADHD podcast. It's the place to be for neurodiversity affirming parents and professionals. I'm your host, Holly Blanc-Moses, the mom neurodivergent therapist. Here we chat about emotional regulation, mental health, social support, executive functioning, learning, and more, all aimed at empowering us to support kids and teens with compassion and understanding. I'm thrilled that you joined me today, and I've got some pretty exciting news to share with you. For those rock star therapists listening right now, I've created continuing education training that is tailor-made for you. Take a deep dive into cutting-edge strategies that you can start using today. The CEs you've wanted for so long are finally here. Go to hollyblancmoses.com/CE training and sign up. You are going to love it. The link is also available in the show notes. Now, if you are a parent or educator listening and you know a therapist or a psychologist that is passionate about supporting kids and teens, I greatly appreciate it if you could pass on this great news. Thanks so much again for your support, and let's get started. Welcome back to the Autism ADHD podcast. I am your host, Holly Blanc-Moses, and today I want to share something deeply personal with you. The story of me receiving my own autism diagnosis as an adult. And if you're a parent trying to understand your child's experience, or you're a therapist wanting to understand your clients more deeply, or you're just trying to navigate your own neurodivergent experience, I think this episode is going to offer some insights. When I received my autism diagnosis, I was not surprised. Working with autistic children and teens in my practice, I'd been seeing myself reflected in their experiences for so many years. But even when you know something intellectually, there's still that emotional component, that fear that was creeping in for me. One of those fears wasn't about being autistic. It was about not being autistic enough. That voice, that one that whispers, but you seem so normal. You've accomplished so much. You can't really be autistic. It's that internalized ableism that so many of us carry around, and we don't even know it. This idea that there's only one way to be autistic, or only one way to be an ADHD person. And if you don't fit that narrow mold, your experience doesn't count. I often see this in my clients. They tell me how their struggles are often minimized. When they tell people they're autistic, they're met with, "No, you're not. You aren't that autistic." Or, "Isn't everyone a little autistic?" One of the most difficult things in life is when you open up to share about yourself. When you take that big risk of being vulnerable about your challenges and your needs, you're met with some version of, "I don't believe you." Some version of, "That's an excuse." Some version of, "Try harder." It's crushing, and it makes neurodivergent kids and teens turn inside themselves. They learn that they can't trust people. No wonder they feel alone. No wonder they pretend they're fine. "I'm fine that I'm sitting at lunch by myself." Maybe they are, or maybe they're not. But they build that mask one piece at a time because it's not safe not to have it on. I'm here with you today, being completely vulnerable, trusting you to be kind, compassionate, and supportive, because I think our listeners are incredible. And I have no doubt that you're going to embrace me, because that is just the kind of people you are. This particular episode is about me sharing my diagnosis with my parents. Yes, I'm 50. I was still nervous about it. When I called my dad, my heart was racing, my thoughts were coming through at lightning speed. Those anxious thoughts of what if he doesn't believe me? The phone was ringing, and I half wished he wasn't going to pick up, but then he did. So I first started off with, hey, do you remember when I had that diagnosis of ADHD a couple years back? He said, yes. And then I explained that I had also been evaluated for autism several months ago, and that the psychologist reported back to me, Holly, I am 100% certain that you're autistic. His first reaction, that's ridiculous. No, you are not autistic. You just think you are. You just think you are because you work with autistic people. That is not true. You were popular. You were on homecoming court. And I had to take a deep breath and explain something that I think many late diagnosed autistic women will recognize. I said, Dad, that wasn't because people liked me. I actually was not popular. It was because I put such tremendous effort into my appearance because it was the only thing I felt like I could control. And then something beautiful happened. He paused, really paused. Then he said, I do remember it taking 2 hours for you to do your hair in the morning before school. And you would take a really long time picking out your clothes the night before because everything had to be perfect. And you'd adjust each piece of clothing on your bed over and over again. I actually forgot about doing that. He was right. I could suddenly picture myself pacing back and forth in my room, looking at my clothes, adjusting them endlessly. This memory just was flooding back. And I remember thinking, if I could get this right, it won't be so bad at school. I asked him if he had remembered things when I was younger, how I would just break down if there was any kind of moisture on my clothes, or if the sides of my socks didn't fit perfectly in the shoes, I would just cry. And he did not remember that. Then I asked, do you remember how sounds were for me? They were really hard. He got quiet again and he said, yes. Then I asked him if he remembered that I would close my eyes really tight and just wincing. I'd put my hands over my ears, and oftentimes I'd just cry silently. He would sometimes put his hands over my hands to try to block out more of the sound, because back then we didn't have all these cool earplugs that we have today. He said, yeah, I do remember that. I remember loud noises being really hard for you. And then I asked him, I said, Dad, did you see any other kids around holding their ears and crying? He said, no, I didn't. Those moments of validation from a parent are so powerful, even when you're an adult. Even though he didn't acknowledge my challenges when I was younger, he misinterpreted them. He was now acknowledging experiences that I sometimes doubted myself. And the anxiety I was feeling at the beginning of that phone call had just gone down. If you want a child's anxiety to decrease, the most powerful thing you can do for them is believe them. I'm going to say that again because it is one of the most important things that I'll probably ever say in my life. If you want a child's anxiety to decrease, the most powerful thing you can do is believe them. Now, I want to talk a little more about my conversation with my dad and about social development. I do remember being in elementary school, and it was a really big treat if we went through the drive-through at Dairy Queen to get ice cream. We didn't do it often, so it was really exciting. every time we pulled up to that drive-through speaker, I would hang out the window and get as close as I possibly could to the speaker. I always said the same thing, just confidently. I'll have my regular. And of course, the person taking the order had absolutely no clue who I was or what on earth I was talking about. If you are in your 40s or 50s, you may remember a show called Cheers. There was a particular character named Norm, and when he came into the bar, everyone knew his name. And the bartender always knew exactly what he wanted, his regular. I love that show. I watched it all the time. And I thought how much easier life would be if people already knew what you needed. They already knew what you wanted without even really saying it. And in this situation, they would already know my order. Anyway, they never knew my order at the Dairy Queen drive-through, considering we were only there a few times a year. But it didn't stop me from asking for my regular. Because one of my life goals, might sound very strange, but that's okay. One of my life goals since I can remember is to walk in a place and say, I'll take my regular. And it finally happened. I was an adult going through my internship in graduate school. My regular was coffee and French fries because I could not literally afford anything else. So that was extremely exciting when that happened. I want to share another example about my social development. And I think it captures perfectly this autistic experience of feeling like you belong with a different age group, as many neurodivergent kids do. They feel more comfortable with either people that are older than them or younger than them. You may have noticed at some point when you drive past a fast food place like McDonald's or Hardee's, Bojangles maybe in the morning. Usually you will find a group of older men in their 60s, 70s, and 80s meeting there for coffee. I remember being in first grade feeling this way. I wanted to hang out with them. I thought those are my people. When I brought this up regularly to my dad, as he remembered during this phone call, I would say, why can't I go there and sit with them? It is not fair. I don't get it. And he would remind me that I was a kid and a girl. So I could not be friends with them. I could not go early in the morning and hang out with them. And I would just be so frustrated. It's not fair that I have to wait until I'm old to hang out with them. It's just not fair. Because I genuinely thought I could fit in with them. I could sit there and I could listen to their stories. I didn't even have to talk if I didn't want to. But if I did, they were going to be more likely to listen to what I had to say. So that's also a lifelong goal of mine that I haven't achieved yet. Now that I'm 50, I am closer than ever. I'm going to give myself a social challenge. In the next year, I'm going to show up. I'm going to try out a couple places, maybe McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, I'm not sure. But I am going to show up in the morning and I'm going to sit near the group. Then if the opportunity arises, I'm going to initiate an interaction and just see how it goes. I'm going to have to keep you posted about that because I have never given up on that goal and I won't. It's going to happen. I'm just not sure when. We also briefly talked about some other topics like my routine around food. For instance, me eating 3 eggs every morning for basically the last 15 years, the same way every single day, how loud print clothing literally hurts my eyes, how seating is really big for me. So for instance, if you see me in my office, you'll notice that my back is against the back wall and I can see doors to my right and my left in front of me. If you see me at a conference, you'll probably notice that if I am able to, I'm going to take a chair out of a row and I'm going to drag it to the back and I'm going to have my back against the wall. And if you've ever listened to my episode on sensory sensitivities, I can link it below. You'll know about sounds and particular songs. Again, I talk more about getting water in my clothes and what that's like. These aren't quirks. They're not things that you just grow out of. These are real things that impact every moment of your life. I want to talk a little more about the social experience because, in my dad's eyes, this was the most confusing. In elementary school and middle school, I struggled to fit in. I still do. I said things that made other kids mad. Kids would avoid me or make mean comments about my appearance. And it seemed like I just did not do anything right. I was rude, I was mean, I was weird when I did not have any intention of being mean or weird or rude. I learned that I can't say what I actually think or feel. It wasn't safe. It just made people mad at me, both adults and kids. So I made a plan for high school. I would try to be as careful with my words as possible. I wouldn't talk as much, even though I just was bursting to say something. I channeled all my efforts, all my energy into the things that I could control because socially it seemed to me that it was just out of control. So my appearance and my grades. These felt safer than social interactions because they have clearer rules and more predictable outcomes. And let's come back to the homecoming court because that just kept coming up during our conversation. And I explained that it was the result of this exhausting performance, hours on hair, clothes adjusted, readjusted until they felt right. So every detail was scrutinized and perfected. I say that, but then I would always forget to brush my hair in school and people would make comments about that. So forget you if you were ever mean to me about it. It was masking at its most intense. And while it might have looked like success from the outside, it was completely miserable and unsustainable. I was constantly mentally and physically exhausted. And this left me feeling disconnected from who I am truly. I asked him more questions about what he remembered about my friendships, like more details about my friendships. He paused again, and I could tell he was really thinking about it. He recognized that I had one consistent friend through school, which I'm grateful because that's not easy either. The frustrating thing was that my masking and my attempt at being as perfect as I could be, it just didn't work out real well either. I wasn't called weird. I was still called rude sometimes, but now I was called stuck up because I wasn't talking much. People misinterpret, oh, she's not anxious and depressed. She's just stuck up. At the same time, I was so desperate to be noticed, but also wanted to hide at the same time. It is this massive push and pull. And there were times where I was noticed, but it was for the wrong reasons. And unfortunately, I was in some pretty vulnerable situations. And it's a painful reality that many autistic kids and teens face these situations when they're desperate to connect, but they don't understand the social rules that aren't spoken. By the end of the phone call, I think my dad was very understanding about my diagnosis. And then it made sense to him. Now it was time to call my mom. This is a different situation because she actually knew that I was going to have this evaluation. So she wasn't surprised by it. Her and my dad actually got divorced when I think I was 3. So there was no way my dad would have known about the evaluation from her. I explained, yes, I had my evaluation and I'm autistic. She just said, okay, because I don't think she was surprised at all. She remembered a lot of things about loud noises and social situations being really difficult for me and being able to put shoes on, and it would take me forever, and just everything felt really big. One thing in our conversation that really stood out was when my mom would take my sister and I to church. And when it was time to separate from the adult service and go to the kids' church, I just froze. No matter which church it was, because this is across churches, I froze. Now, my little sister is 2 years younger than me. And so we were typically assigned to different groups. And I would just cry. When I cry, you would not know unless you're looking at me because I don't really make any noise. I've learned that when I was young, don't be a crybaby. When I would cry, my tears would just come down. Usually people didn't really know what to do. People that were working in children's church, I don't think they saw this all the time by somebody my age. I was just terrified to go in a group of same age peers, especially when I didn't know anybody. I would rather do anything than that. So I begged over and over again to go with my little sister and be in her group, because then at least I would feel a little less anxious. I would still feel nervous, but not as anxious because she would be there. Not only that, the kids were younger, so I felt more comfortable. I remember the people there being like, oh, it's going to be fine. Once you get in there, you'll make friends. They meant well, but they really did not understand. It wasn't about me having trouble just transitioning. Yes, that was hard, but it was much, much more than that because I had so many interactions that were difficult. I knew it was not going to be that easy the way they made it sound. I was very thankful because sometimes they let me go with my sister, and sometimes my mom would just let me stay with her in the adult church. Sharing this story, the story of me telling my parents about my autism diagnosis, it reinforces something I tell families, therapists, others that I work with, that autistic experiences are valid, even when they don't look like what you expect. Being autistic doesn't mean you can't achieve things. Being autistic does not mean that you're not going to have a successful life. Being autistic doesn't mean you can't learn to navigate this life and figure out what works for you. Being autistic, what it does mean is that what looks effortless for some people might require tremendous energy and effort for us. Oftentimes, I see that assumption and it gets in the way of everything. It's the assumption that something is easy because sometimes it's not. So if a child, a teen, an adult tells you something is hard for them, believe them. Believe them and ask if they would like you to help those moments of sensory overwhelm, those routines, the need to look a certain way because I couldn't control other things, the preference for different age groups, these social struggles. These weren't character flaws or phases that I was just going to grow out of. They were signs of a different neurological wiring that didn't need fixed. It needed understanding and support. I needed understanding and support. I appreciate how they were willing to talk with me. It was really meaningful to me. Your acceptance and understanding can mean everything to your child, your client, or your student. And if you are an adult who received a late diagnosis, or you're considering an evaluation, or self-diagnosis feels good for you, I want you to remember that your story matters. Your struggles were real, even though maybe other people question them or minimize them. Your struggles were real, even if you found ways to cope or mask them. You don't have to be autistic enough for anyone else. Your experience is valid, and your story deserves to be heard. Thanks again for listening to the Autism ADHD podcast. If you feel like someone would benefit from this episode, I would greatly appreciate it if you passed it on to them. See you next time. Bye-bye. If you found this podcast helpful, I greatly appreciate it if you could take a second to give it a 5-star review. With your positive feedback, I can continue bringing you free, valuable information. As an extra thanks to you for sticking around, there are special gifts waiting for you in the show notes. You'll find links to free resources on supporting neurodivergent kids and teens with social interaction, emotional regulation, and more. So come on down to the show notes and get your free resources. Take care, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
All content provided is protected under applicable copyright, patent, trademark, and other proprietary rights. All content is provided for informational and educational purposes only. No content is intended to be a substitute for professional medical or psychological diagnosis, advice, or treatment. Information provided does not create an agreement for service between Holly Blanc Moses Crossvine Clinical Group, the interviewee, Holly Blanc Moses LLC, and the recipient. Consult your physician regarding the applicability of any opinions or recommendations with respect to your symptoms or medical condition or the symptoms or medical condition of your family member. Children or adults who show signs of dangerous behavior toward themselves and/or others should be placed immediately under the care of a qualified professional.